Man, his entire hand was chopped into mincemeat. Yet this old man claims he can regrow a severed arm. But even so, he remained a total sucker for her. Because the unique charm exuding from Su-Han caused him to come back to life and have his arm reattached, as if resurrected from the dead. And still, you couldn't master the Great Eye Sword technique. This means, Master Zhang Laozi, without using inner power to communicate telepathically with the Master, I must go to Dayuan Mountain first. The Master's pupils dilated in disbelief. Is it really worth it for you to do this? If you're willing, you could very well reach the heights of inner mastery. Why bother with such trivial matters? With an aged face set in resolve, beyond persuasion, he said. Eldest senior brother, leader of the formation, guardian of the sword tomb, second senior brother in charge of the sex gates, all of you have taken your responsibilities. As for me, I've roamed carefree for more than 30 years. It's time I did something for this world. What's the point of reaching that state? Kunlun Mountain lies barren, devoid of anything. Meanwhile, the journey to Dayuan Mountain, that's my mission. Upon hearing this, the master's pupils dilated with shock, visibly shaken. Dayuan Mountain, the arm you gave him? Could it be? Aging, upon witnessing the grandeur, Ma Su said with a voice of experience. At our age, we should be more composed, like me. The master looked on with an aged gaze and said faintly. That thing, even if it's out on the streets, would still require my medical expertise and the medicinal ingredients from Linglong Pavilion. It would need at least several years of treatment before it could fully adapt. Who would have thought? The old man suddenly said, slapping his forehead as if to ward off the cold. This is easy. Take him as your apprentice, teach him your medical skills first, then find a way to get him into the Linglong Pavilion. That'll solve it. A completely baffled Su-Han stood there, utterly clueless. But Master Sun forcefully pushed him away with a single palm strike. Aren't you going yet? Call your master? Hurry up. Su Hangong knelt down in a gesture of respect and said, Master, your disciple greets you with respect. The master was silent for a moment, then, in agitation, he spoke. If fate has brought us together, then let us first stand up. Suddenly, with aged features, he looked up to the sky, letting out a long sigh, his face brimming with satisfaction. Although Su-Han was baffled by this turn of events, he knew deep down that the old man was only trying to look out for him. And with that, a whole spread of dishes was served up on the table. Eat up, it's on someone else's dime. This was the first time Su-Han saw Tsung Lao so happy, but what he didn't know was that it would also be the last. Early the next morning, Su-Han followed the elderly Tsung Lao to the Dayuan Mountain. Only the master knew the peril of their journey, inevitably taking the child with him, he let out a long sigh. And Su-Han, while advancing into the map of Dayuan Mountain, learned from the elderly that the heavy sword he carried was indeed the notorious blade the brothers sought when they emerged from seclusion. Do you know why people don't believe he's that sword? Because the more you care about something, the less you show it, the less others will care too. This remark hit home, like a wake-up call in the biting cold, making it impossible to see through the old man before me. Soon, the two of them arrived at the Great Abyss. It's a mountain cut cleanly in half, as if severed at the waist. What kind of heaven-defying feat must it have taken to slice through a mountain so smoothly? And from these 10 armories, the veteran draws his fearsome sword. If on that day, armed with the art of Jian Yule, Fu Yao, and the techniques of dueling, victory or defeat would still have been uncertain. Yan Ba, Zhou, you exude a profound inner strength, kid. Let me ask you, old man, do you dare to accept the arm I've found for you? Su-Han immediately knelt down, and Qinxing said, It's a gift from your senior. Su-Han did not refuse. A fine young person, full of vigor and spirit. Then, with a single bound, he leaped to the center of the broken mountain. Seeing this, Su-Han wanted to follow. But I ended up bumping my head and getting a big lump.
Because he had cast a barrier over the entire Dayuan Mountain, ignoring the calls of Su-Han as if they were nothing. This sentence seems to be from a context requiring specific cultural or story background, possibly from a fantasy or historical novel. The translation would seek to maintain the original flavor while conveying the meaning in American English. In the barren southern lands of the 39th lineage, he invokes the Qi, enters the slaughter deck, crosses the seas, and drifts, seeking an audience with the Grand Army. Grant me an audience, mighty forces. Grant me an audience, mighty forces. The piercing call echoed for dozens of miles throughout the entire mountain range. Suddenly, a purple vortex appeared, and with a cold voice, it spoke. Has it been 300 years already? Following that, a monster resembling an upright ginseng emerged, sneering. Has sword forest of the southern wilderness run out of people? To think a mere mortal with big glasses has come to seal me. Has my formidable reputation been forgotten by all? Da Jun said with a laugh. It's been over 4,000 years since my ancestors sealed away their might. Now, here I am in this region. Although my cultivation is not on par with my forebears, I'm willing to give it a shot, even with my frail body. With a look of disdain, Da Jun, unfazed by your age, spoke slowly and confidently. Da Jun, do you dare to wager a match with me? This piqued the interest of an army dormant for thousands of years. Speak up, they said, Let's see, what do you want to bet on? If I should unfortunately fall, and no one enters the Great Abyss Mountain within the next 10 years, the army may use that time to find a way out of this predicament. However, should I be so lucky as to come out alive, I would then ask to borrow the strength of your troops.
Caught off guard, Su Han was suddenly stunned, never expecting that Sung Lao would make such a sacrifice for him. At that moment, Dejun's eyes suddenly narrowed, coveting a piece of my own flesh, an arm. Upon hearing this, the aged drew their swords in defiance, and even the great army faltered. With a wave of Dejun's right hand, several streaks of malevolent energy appeared. Poisonous, you say? The likes of this little kid don't scare me one bit. At the same time, weathered and old, he lifts his blade, as the great river follows the skyline. During the workout, his strength surged by dozens of times, and the army's attack was quietly neutralized. If the younger generation didn't have some confidence to lean on, they wouldn't dare to embarrass themselves in front of the whole army. With their profound knowledge, the vast army swiftly advanced and launched an attack. In this case, with official matters weighing heavily and age creeping up, one can only play defense passively. And his arm, too, began to disintegrate as rheumatism invaded his body. At this moment, Dejun's pupil shrank, and he realized it was indeed true. Xianji unleashed his killer move, relentlessly striking Sung Lao with a barrage of kicks. Sung has already visited Kunlun. To confront those entities, only this sword will suffice. However, I am incapable of wielding the ferocity of this malevolent blade. Dajuan, now I finally understand the profound intention of your aged wisdom. You aim to take my arm, using demonic power to suppress the sword within my chest. Or perhaps, you want to place your bets on that kid. During the grand celebration at Sanglao High, he declared, I merely gave him a key, nothing more. Whether he uses it or not, that's none of my business. But my arm isn't something you can just take so easily. Of course, I'm well aware. Immediately, his fingers formed a seal, and he shouted towards Xuan. Boy, are you watching closely? This is the last technique I'm going to teach you. Before your eyes, a massive sword strikes directly at the heavens. As you age, you keep working out, pushing yourself. Golden lotuses sprang forth from the soles of his feet in an instant. Even if it's fate ordained by the heavens, it's still open to advice. This scene rendered Dejun, the god of desolation, speechless, and the immortal in the mirror exclaimed, How is this possible? This text appears to be an excerpt from a Chinese novel or story, possibly involving fantasy or martial arts elements. A direct translation that captures the original tone and meaning might be. During the archery performance, as soon as the bow is half drawn, it signifies the commencement of the sword judgment, the great vehicle, the lamp, the spirit, the moment of the immortal's tranquility. And I, merely using the beast garden as a catalyst, forcefully unfold the lotus. And yet, please note that without more context, it's challenging to provide a translation that captures all nuances of the original text. Some of the terms like sword judgment, great vehicle, lamp, spirit, and immortal might refer to specific concepts or techniques within the story's universe that would typically be explained or translated in a way that is consistent with the rest of the text. Su Han couldn't hold it together when this happened, but blocked by a barrier, he was powerless to do anything. The aged warrior brandished his sword with a roar of fury. Several golden lotuses exploded from the heart of the shattered mountain. The glaring golden light made it impossible for Su Han to open his eyes and assess the situation clearly. All he knew was that when he opened his eyes again, in the air, there was only Xingtian, plummeting down at high speed. And this incident is something that Su, Han, and Xiong have been unable to forget for nearly their entire lives. A month later, the master waited for the return of his disciples at the entrance of the Yuan mountain. Su Han, holding a severed arm, approached him with his head hung low, moving slowly. Upon seeing this, the master simply uttered one word. Returned. Su Han looked at his master, his eyes vacant and unseeing. What does this arm really mean to me? The key to unloading goods, the ladder to the heavens, could also be the chains that imprison you in the abyss. With a tone of cold formality and urgency, I pressed. And what about him? What kind of person is he really? The master slowly raised his head and recited a poem. Soon, the scene shifts to Chang'an City, several years later. At this moment, outside the gates of Marquis Ningguo, friends from the court are rushing to report to the Marquis of Ningguo. Because his daughter got the opportunity to further her studies at the exquisite Linglong Pavilion, the great Zhou gained another potential candidate for the Earth Immortal Realm. However, just as the Marquis was seeing off the guests, a young man suddenly appears behind. Yo, looks like I'm late to the party, missed out on a good meal. This man, formerly studied for 2.5 years, is Su Han. But unexpectedly, the Marquis mistook him for a beggar. So, he casually ordered the servants to bring over some leftovers. When Yishua and Su Han couldn't help but roll their eyes, dude, I'm not here to beg. And the Marquis, observing Su Han's demeanor, scolded sharply. Do you realize where you are? A country bumpkin, coming here to run wild. Su Han took out a letter, held it, opened it, and upon reading, instantly understood. The Marquis snatched the envelope from his hand with visible annoyance. And the man, he looked at just one word. So she just went ahead and showed you, a 90-degree bow, bending over deeply.